college is not a 4-year experience.
Right.
College is potentially a 40-year experience. And the reason I say that way is if you are diligent parents that want to try to avoid college debt for your children, you need to start saving early. So the savings process could be 18 years. The college experience is 4 years, maybe 5. And then potentially there is still debt that has to be paid off for the next decade, maybe more. So it really, really does become a 30-plus year process. We're going to get started here with episode number 9. Welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to be jumping in to college education expenses in general. Well, we thought it was opportunistic because
school's about to start.
Parents are excited for the most part. Some of it is a little emotional. My daughter is starting high school, which is just insane to me. Yep. And
college is right around the corner for her.
I know some of the crazy adult things that you have to go through and endure in high school. And that makes me a little apprehensive of what she's going to have to endure just kind of emotionally and all that stuff over the next 4 years. Because high school isn't emotionally easy for a lot of people.
Right.
But it's also a time full of the best times of your life. I can still look back at high school, my friends, all the things that I got to do. On the flip side, I know a lot of people that are listening probably have kids going off to college, which can be like a wreck.
I think my parents were excited that I left and got out of the
there's
house.
also, there's if we're being, non-judgmental here.
Yeah.
It's quite okay for parents to be really excited.
Yeah.
The kids I joke around with my daughter all the time that, when she's off to college, I can finally live in my house the way that I want to, which is exciting. But at the same time, it's both emotionally, it's emotional just mainly because it's sad and exciting, right?
It's a major life transition.
Yeah, my college experience for me was not traditional, right? So after high school, I left for the Army, which was also emotional for my mother because I wasn't going just to college. I was going off to Army at the, this was early 2002, 2003. And so it was kind of the peak or the entry point of the war on terror, Iraq and Afghanistan. So that was emotional for her. But my college experience, I fought tooth and nail through my active duty years and obtained a lot of college. And I did it for free because the Army paid for quite a bit. The military paid for a lot of it. The GI Bill, I leveraged that quite a bit too. For you,
my path was pretty traditional. Like right out of high school, go straight to college, get your bachelor's degree. For me, I was trying to get through as quick as possible.
When did you start preparing for college?
I would say I started preparing maybe 8 months, if I remember correctly, 8 or 9 months before I graduated was when I started doing all the applications for schools. And I already kind of knew where I wanted to go because I had a lot of friends that were already there or friends that had graduated from there. So I kind of had my mind set on Georgia Southern. So it was kind of easy for me to, as long as I got accepted into it. Yeah. And back then it was pretty easy to get approved at Georgia Southern. Today it's not easy. Yeah.
So, I think, it's crazy to think about that over the next couple weeks, there's this, actualization for millions of people across the country, whether it's parents that have been working so hard to save money for college, whether it's all the work that they've done over the past year in prepping for, through everything from kids taking the ACT and SAT to the exhaustive application process to applying to grant and aid things. And so much work has been put into these moments that are going to be recognized, which I think is really cool. And I think, you know, through all the chaos and busyness of life, like taking a second to be like, yeah, lots of people are like those goals that we set decades ago, or at least 18 years ago for some people, are being realized. They're like starting to come to fruition, and that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool to think about.
And I think the like prepping for college, you know, in high school, that's like part of your rite of passage, you know, because a lot of kids you get senioritis your senior year, but you have to do all those applications and SAT, all that. But it's like that rite of passage to get you across the bridge to college, to your first day of freshman year.
Yeah, and we're going to talk later on about some tools. I was just looking at some tools, and like just knowing, like, you know, I owe my daughter a conversation too as she heads into high school to say, hey, like, look at this list on this website and realize that college is a competitive space. And a lot of colleges, we were looking, I'll pull it up again, we'll reference it later. Yeah, Vanderbilt has like a 9.7% acceptance rate, give or take.
That's tough.
And like, they're kind of minimum for ACT and GPA scores, like really high. And it's one of those things that as a 14-year-old, my daughter going into high school has to, if that's her aspiration, if that's what she wants, she has to make that decision as a 14-year-old girl to realize in a couple weeks,
GPA.
In a couple weeks, she's going to get a first assignment turned in, and an A matters. It doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter for the A itself, but it potentially matters because not an A or not a B could have implications on her 4 years down the road, 10 years, 30 years down the road. Lifetime income starts to change. This is wild to think about.
And I'll
probably tame that conversation a little bit just so I don't overwhelm her, because that's not the intention. It's not the right way to do it.
And I've seen a lot of kids like that just walk through their freshman year and they have a 1.5 GPA. It's even if they just, had A's all the way through, that's still really hard hole to dig yourself out of. Starting off,
it's huge
with a 1.5 or 2.0 GPA.
So we'll talk about a lot of things on this podcast today, all of it surrounding the college back to school conversation, off to school conversation. It's not back to college. There are some people that are going to be listening to this that are like, well, I don't have a kid in college yet. We got something for you, because some of you guys are considering having kids, and we're going to get into like the first part of this conversation is going to be the cost of college. So understanding how you can prepare for your one-day children to go to school. And then we will also talk about college debt. So maybe you don't have kids, maybe you don't even have a family, the idea of a family in mind yet,
right?
But you potentially have college debt. So we'll talk and address some of those things too. College planning is something that we work with people quite often on because of the cost. It's so expensive these days to go to school. It is no longer, college is not a 4-year experience.
Right.
College is potentially a 40-year experience. And the reason I say that way is if you are diligent parents that want to try to avoid college debt for your children, you need to start saving early. So the savings process could be 18 years. The college experience is 4 years, maybe 5. And then potentially there is still debt that has to be paid off for the next decade, maybe more. So it really, really does become a 30-plus year process. And so because of that, and because of the overwhelming cost involved, a lot of people do approach financial planners to either talk about college planning for future children, for current children, for kids going to school now, and or to manage debt that they have. So we do work a lot with people on this. And if you're one of those people that are listening to the podcast that just want the education, we've talked before about when to engage a financial planner. If not us, just somebody you trust, know, or have been referred to. This is something that would be a good idea to work with a professional on. And maybe all you need is just one solid conversation, or maybe you need somebody to help you through this journey. But nonetheless, it's important. When we look at cost, so I pulled up some information on the cost of college, and a couple like really stagger. So we're in this like economic cycle right now, going through this thing. Everybody's heard the word inflation at this point, and we are freaking out because like I say freaking out. We're anxious, and the markets are anxious, and investors are anxious, and people are feeling it because we're in a place of, you know,
higher inflation,
a 9 or 10%
right
inflation. The posted CPI last time was what, 9.1, right?
Yeah.
So that's a number that represents inflation. We know it's a little bit higher, and when it comes down to the real, but the measurement is 9.1. The reason why that I say that 9% inflation is making us panic.
Right.
The average, the 50-year average, going like more than that, almost 60-year average, 61-year average that I found, insane. 8% is the average inflationary cost of college. 8% year over year, and we're not talking. I'm not pulling like some small number out of a hat. We're looking at a 60-year trend, right? So sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but over the average over 60 years is an 8% inflation rate,
and
when it comes
rarely
to
hear
college cost.
People talking about that, freaking out about it. Like, I rarely hear it on the news or anything. You just don't hear about it.
It's staggering. It's upsetting, and it's hard to perceive. So this is from a website, educationdata.org, and educationdata.org says that today, the average annual cost of tuition from a 4-year college is $21,365, national average. Okay, that's per year.
That's for in-state.
If you go down on this website, you can actually see some different charts and stuff. But one of the things is there's another website, well, from another page on the collegedata.com site. It breaks down private college, public in-state, and public out-of-state. So $27,330 is the $27,330. The cost, the average cost, national average cost of public colleges for in-state tuition. Mm-hmm. Okay, so before the show, I'm like, hey, I want to make sure that we're talking to everyone. So we have a lot of listeners that are like, hey, I'm thinking about having. I was just having a conversation with a client yesterday who's planning on having a child, right? Planning on having a child. If we take the average cost today of $27,000 and inflate that by 8%, how much do they need to save over the next 18 years, assuming they have a kid, you know, this year?
Right.
The cost is $435,000 if inflation stays persistent. And again, we're looking at 60 years of data.
Right.
So over the past 60 years, if something doesn't change in the next 20 years, the clients that I was speaking with yesterday, if they have a kid this year, need to plan to save about $430,000 in order to afford to pay for their kids' college. That's about $900 a month, assuming some I want to say average. I actually went a little bit higher than like a typical average return that I would use on investment analysis. So I'm not trying to take shortcuts here or scare people.
Yeah.
It's staggering. Like it's the colleges cannot continue to do this. I don't see how it's supported, but if we, again,
I'm surprised that it's been supported as long as it has.
That's the problem is you're like, man,
Nobody
this
said anything
can't
about
be
it.
sustained, but it has been sustained for 60 years. So what could potentially change in the next 20 to make sure that the young couple that was in here yesterday don't have to save, or don't have to pay $400,000 to send their kid to an average in-state school? That's insane. That's wild.
So it's 20 right now. So it's about $27,000 a year,
a little over
in tuition, and in 18 years from now, we're thinking it's going to be over
about
$100,000,
a little over about $109,000, and then you have to do some inflation and growth math for 4 years of college.
And the college inflation rate stays consistent.
If it stayed the same. It's just wildly upsetting, and and it's expensive. So this is an important conversation. And there's also people listening that are like, I'm not planning on paying for college for my kids, or I'm not planning on having kids. But because of this trend over the past 60 years, you're listening and you're like, I also have, $50,000 of student debt right now.
Right.
Right. So we're going to kind of speak to all these different things on the call. The cost is so high. It's such a burden that so many people, the average American, I think it's like 60, what was it? It might have been higher, 70 or 80% of Americans have college debt.
I don't remember that number. That wouldn't surprise me.
Loan debt, college loan debt. It's astronomical high. Currently, it's estimated that about $1.75 trillion is the total balance of all student loans in the United States. Wow. That's wildly high.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple really important kind of things to speak on. Is first and foremost understanding that with student loans, there's federal loans and there's private loans. All the things that we talk about in terms of like loan forgiveness or loan forgiveness programs. I just read something in prep for this that there's like states that are offering student loan forgiveness if you're a nurse working in this particular state, because there's nurse shortages. So it's not like sometimes corporations will pay back student loans if you come to work for them as an incentive, as an employee benefit.
I know a lot
but
of
we're talking
teachers,
about actual states that will pay if you're working in their state. And the reason why that's important, so teachers, nurses,
if you teach at a Title IX school, then I think that's a
federal.
I think it's a
5-year
period. They'll forgive a certain amount, not all of it, but it's like a specific amount.
But the important thing is in even on this kind of national conversation about potential student loan forgiveness from the federal government, just kind of across the board, whether it's 10,000 or however they do it, all of that is in conversation regarding federal loans. So if I have, and I'll tell you kind of an amusing story. It's sad, but still kind of funny because I know this guy very well. He's a friend of mine. The Army will forgive student loans if you join the Army. So if I went to 4 years of school, I had $40,000. Right? Well, no, I was.
You were in.
I was in. So the Army actually paid for my school.
Okay.
But if let's say I went through 4 years of college and I had $40,000 of student debt, I could join the Army as long as it's federal. The Army will forgive will pay off those loans. They will not pay private loans. And so my buddy joined. He obviously had a recruiter that didn't tell him the whole truth. And if you've ever dealt with recruiters in the Army, the common theme is they don't tell the truth all the time. But one of the only reasons that he initially joined the Army was to get the student loans paid off.
Right.
He joined the Army. He went through basic training. We get to the same duty station, and that's when he learned that the Army wasn't going to pay for his loans because they were private, and he had a 4-year commitment. He did end up staying. He's done great. It was awesome, but
a lot of different things to consider when you're looking at that kind of stuff. If you're in those professions,
I think it's just really important because like what people typically, and the reason why I bring that up is because if I graduate and I start having to pay my student loans, I'm going to start getting mail and I'm going to start getting phone calls from people to refinance my loan.
Right.
My federal loan might be at 6% interest or 5% interest, and then now I have Bank of so and so saying, hey, we can refinance your student loans at 2.3%. Great, that can be a smart decision. However, if you make that decision, understand you're going from federal to private, and those things you lose the forgiveness capacity on those private loans. So that's my word of caution when it comes to that. There's a lot of conversation going on about student loan forgiveness right now, as far as like just a big broad blanket forgiveness. I have my feelings on that kind of personally, and I'll admit that the reason why I see that shouldn't be the case.
What you tell me the other day, if you want free college, you can get it.
You can join the Army. Yeah. And I think again, I'm a little jaded. That like I went to the Army because I could not afford college at the time, and I had to put my life on the line, give up quite a bit of my life to the military. because I did want education. It was very important to me. So I have never had college debt. I joined the Army, fought for the country to get this benefit, this gift. So, you know, now looking back, maybe I could have just taken out some federal loans and then waited for the government. Sorry about that. That was really loud.
What was that?
I have no idea. But you know, potentially because of that, you know, I could have made my decisions differently and just waited for the government to bail me out. That's all selfish reasoning, right? Like, we can disagree on that, and if you disagree with me on that, I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. I'm just being pretty selfish and jaded on that. However, the problem, and I think that we can all, even if we have significant student loans, I think we can say and we can acknowledge that the federal government forgiving student loans does not change or give any consequence to the universities across the country. And that's the system that's broken, right? And so
I agree with you on that. I have 3 degrees. I got student loan debt, you know, 4 of those, paying them off. Like, I think I made that decision, right? So I'm fine with
these
that.
are very personal. Like, again, I think it's important that we understand, like, people will disagree with us because there's plenty of economic studies that show the benefit, like major economic benefit to forgiving, you know, $10,000 of every American student. Right. There's a lot of that. But again, I think that the problem and what I haven't been convinced on, or what I'd love to have more conversations about to understand is, if I'm, you know, Vanderbilt University and I'm inflating the cost to attend my school by 8% a year, what am I learning by saying, hey, I can continue to behave this way because federal government and taxpayers are going to eventually, you know, pay for my choice of raising the cost of school, continuing to build these beautiful buildings in downtown, you know, inner city areas where real estate's wildly expensive. It's a tough conversation. And so with that, another interesting fact. So again, I mentioned 1.75 trillion in aggregated student loan debt in the United States.
Yep.
I looked up, there's a website, and it's a collegeraptor.com, and there's just shy of $1 trillion in the United States that sit in college endowment funds, right? So let's speak kind of average person here. I attend college. I get a little bit of scholarship money. I get a little bit of grant money, maybe. I'm working. I'm paying for some of my school, but I end up with $40,000 of college debt at the end of 4 years. Yep. Okay. I had to pay for an increased college tuition because it's being inflated at 8% a year. Yep. I'm, you know, working my tail off to do this, and then all of a sudden I get a certificate, I get my education, and I am now $40,000 in debt. Meanwhile, the school that I attended has $1 billion plus, billions of dollars sitting in an endowment fund that they could access, but instead they're going to rely on government grants, research grants, things like that, to also bolster the tuition that they're charging me to have, you know, billions and billions of dollars of revenue come across. So it's just a wild thing that we could potentially open up some of these endowment funds to reduce the cost of education. But then, you know,
yeah, I mean, even still, the 8% inflation on tuition just blows my mind. Are you getting 8% more of an education or 8% more of an ROI on that education, on that degree? I don't think so.
Well, the beautiful part about it is, you know, there's colleges that have, you know, $6 billion endowment funds.
That's insane.
You've racked up $40,000 of debt to attend. You've paid them every year, and then what happens 2 years after you graduate?
Oh, they're calling you.
What are they? Yeah, they're calling you saying, "Hey,
you want to donate to
would
the
you like to
endowment
donate to the college? You know, did you have a great experience? Do you want others to have that too?" And so I think that's just really an important part of the conversation to say, like, there's a ton of money sitting in these schools that continue to make a ton of money. It's kind of a broken system.
It's definitely a broken system.
All that said, it's just really hard to navigate college planning. And hopefully we have some really intelligent people in this world that can create this kind of new path forward for education. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, I think we want to jump in to talk about how we see college planning as a process, right? So in this sense, we'll kind of talk to you about how our brains move through the process. So if you come and sit down with us, depending on where you're at, some different things that we might think about. And then we'll end by showing there's a couple tools that I want to show you guys that I think are phenomenal. So with that being said, college planning, where do we start? Where do we go?
So into the 4 ways that it can be paid for, 4, 5, 6.
So we talk, like the first place I start when I sit down with someone or when I'm talking to someone, I try to put them into a point on kind of a line graph. Like where are they? If we're the 3 places that you can fall in that graph are you can fall into funding years,
right?
You can fall into college years, and then you can fall into post-college years. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that we're going to simplify this because I really want to make this as simple as possible. If you're in the funding years, basically what that means is we are pre-funding. We are trying to save money and prepare for the cost of college. We can be doing this for ourselves. We can be doing this for our kids. We can be doing this for our grandkids. Mm-hmm. Okay. If we're doing this now for young children, I would argue that this is such a family affair. And I think it's wildly important that, as parents, don't ever hesitate to make sure your parents, the grandparents, aunts, uncles all understand, hey, we're setting aside this fund for little.
I completely agree. This is one thing that's overlooked.
College costs. So open this conversation up family-wide. There's potential benefits for every layer of contributing money to college funding. So inside of funding years, again, we're trying to simplify this. So while some of these are more appropriate for different types of people, everyone kind of has these things as options. All right. So option 1 is we can put money into what they call a UGMA fund or a UTMA fund. This is a particular kind of account where if let's say I open one for my daughter, I am the owner of the account. However, I'm putting the assets into this account for her. So there's some protections inside of that. Mm-hmm. There's some different types of reasons that we would make this decision. What I need to understand is that age of majority, typically by most states, is recognized around 18 or 21 years old.
Every state's different.
Every state is different. When you turn 20, like let's say it's 21, when you turn 21, all the assets in that account are now owned by the child that is the beneficiary of that account.
They can now make the decisions on what happens with
Yep. So if 21, that might put me as a junior in college. Let's say all of a sudden I become an owner of a $50,000 account.
Yep.
And I'm a junior. We're having a big party, potentially, right? So you got to be really careful there and understand the potential impacts. The other impact of a UGMA or UTMA account is that there are potential what they call kiddie tax implications. So just understanding if I move money into my daughter's UGMA account, if she makes so much in interest or dividends on that account, she could potentially be liable. The taxes actually come back to me.
Right.
And taxed at my rate instead of hers. So that's just something to be considerate of. There are tax consequences. Option 2, something that's a little outdated now, but used to be very popular and could potentially be popular in the future, and still some people actually enjoy them, are educational savings bonds. So typically these are bought through a bank. One thing that's important with the EE bonds is 24 years old. You got to be 24 years to buy one. So you're actually buying this kind of for benefit of a child, because I can't buy it and put it, I can't put it in a UGMA account because the account is for someone who's under 24. So just keep that in mind, that there's some age restrictions, and they also don't provide a ton of growth, but they do have some incentives on the back end when we spend them for college cost. Another option would be a Coverdell education account. And with this, a couple things. Coverdell's exist largely because we can use a Coverdell account pre-college years. So I can use it for K through 12 years. And I can also use it for things in addition to tuition only. So I can use it for expenses. I can use it, books, uniforms, things like this. The drawback to a Coverdell is that I can only put $2,000 a year in per child, not per donor. And so, my daughter can have one Coverdell account, and I can put in 1,000, and Josh, you can put in 1,000, but then nobody else can give that year. Right. So it's only two. So multiple donors are possible, but only a maximum of $2,000 a year. So thus gives us the 529 plan. And 529.
There's also an age limit on Coverdells. They have to be used by age 30.
So we'll talk about more of that one. Yep, we'll talk more about that down here on the withdrawal side of things. So with that, leads us into funding a 529, kind of like the Cadillac of college savings. I'll say, there's a lot of really creative strategies that people use to fund accounts for college. I've come across a couple people that do what I do, and they'll almost like try to sell you on this like new, creative, like brilliant way to save for college. I'd be cautious about that kind of stuff. Over complex or brand new, brilliant ideas sometimes give you a little anxiety. Make my spidey senses tingle. So just keep that in mind. But 529, just very simply, it's a great tool. If I put in money, it grows tax deferred. And if I use it for college cost, it is then tax free. Right? So it's very simple. Some other things that, because of the beauty of 529s, the limits are kind of uncapped. So you can put in as much money as you want. Most of the time, what you'll see if you read is that there's like currently for 2022, there's a $16,000 limit. And it's not so much the limit of what goes into the 529.
It's a gift tax.
As much as if I give more to a 529 than 16,000, I open myself up to potential tax implications. All right. One really creative thing though is you can actually give $16,000 per donor into a single account. So if like my daughter has a 529, if all her grandparents were very well off, doing very well for themselves, grandma, grandpa could potentially all put $16,000 a year into that account. And not just to mention that if she has grandparents that are potentially liable for estate tax consequences because they're doing very well for themselves, they could actually do $16,000 per person, but they could do they could prorate 5 years all at once.
A 5-year lump sum.
So if I had a brand new kid, grandparents that were very, very well off, were very excited about this, we're potentially looking at, $160,000 gifts per set of grandparents into that 529 on like the birthday. That should be plenty to fund college 18 years down the road. So the 529 plan is just this incredible tool. It can really help that generational gifting, and especially, some tax implications there for that generational gifting. It's just really, really incredible. Two main types of college savings plan, two main types of 529s. Most of us are familiar with the fact that I can put money into kind of a savings vehicle. Again, I put the money in, it grows tax deferred, and then when I use the money, I make a sell in my account, and I use the cash to pay for a qualified college expense. It's then tax free. That's a traditional kind of college savings plan, a 529 vehicle. The other 529 vehicle that some states offer, some institutions like universities and stuff, will offer a 529 plan that is prepaid tuition. So I'm actually buying college credits. Typically the way it works, and there can be kind of tons of plays on this, but typically I might be like today, let's say one semester hour is $1,000. Again, I know that college inflation is about 8% a year. So I'm actually just going to buy the college tuition hour today for the cost today. Yep. And then in 18 years, when my kid goes to that school, they will actually just have the college credit paid for the price that it was.
Right.
The downside to that is sometimes there's some limitations on transferability of that. So if I want my kid to go, like Josh, you're all about Georgia Southern.
Right.
You want your kid to go to Georgia Southern. You buy these prepaid credits. Then all of a sudden you realize there's a huge limitation to transferring those when your kid says, hey, Dad, like, yep. I'm not going to Georgia Southern.
Yep.
So that becomes
going to Miami or something
yep.
out of state.
Right. So there's a lot of issues. There's some issues. You just have to understand what those limitations can be based on the plan that you're buying into. There are some plans that are open to transfers, though, that will transfer credit hours and different things like that. So that really sums up the funding years. Again, UGMA's accounts, they can be great. They offer some tax savings on the backside. You do open yourself up to some potential tax implications there. And the age of majority when the kid becomes the owner of the account could be problematic if your kid's wild like I would have been. No judgment there. The other one, EE bonds, again, some tax favorability in that. You just got to be 24 to buy them, so you're buying them in your name. So there's some age restrictions there. Coverdell education's great. It's just capped at $2K, which makes it really hard. Again, we just talked about $400,000+ for the cost of college. And over the next 18 years, the max I could fund in there would be $36,000. So that, again, there's growth and stuff that can still happen, but there's some huge restrictions on that. Beautiful thing about the Coverdell is the expense side of pre-college years. So paying for expenses on K through 12 education. 529s can be used now, K through 12. However, they are limited to only covering tuition. So that's really the funding years. We move into the college years. So now, my daughter's now 18. She's going off to college, and there are some things that I can do inside of the college years. So one, I can apply for grants, for loans. And again, we're going to talk through a tool in just a second that's so incredible for that. The other piece there is applying for like Pell Grants, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, and Stafford loans. Now with that, there's some income restrictions, right? You can phase yourself out of that stuff pretty quickly. It's actually very low, in my opinion. I think that we should.
For which one?
For a Stafford loan, for a Pell Grant.
Okay.
It was around, did we say 60-ish thousand?
I think it's 60,000 for the Pell as a household income.
Yeah.
It doesn't. That's a household income.
So it's really, really low. So that would be something if you're looking into a Pell Grant or a Stafford loan. You would need to do your research to say, okay, is my income actually low enough to qualify for this? Yeah. If your income's over that and you haven't saved appropriately for college, then you can go to look at parent loans, right? So again, this would be what they call a PLUS loan. It's a parent loan for undergraduate students. A lot of times you might be like, it might be hard for me to qualify for a loan. There's some favorability given, some approvals made that probably wouldn't otherwise be made for the PLUS program. So over about 60K, you're looking at PLUS loans. Under 60K, you can still get the PLUS loan, but you're also going to be able to qualify for Pell Grants, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grants, and subsidized Stafford loans. With that, any out-of-pocket expenses that you pay, so I get paid my income, and I just give that to the school. So there's I'm not working with the grants, I'm not working with the loans, I'm just paying for college. You open yourself up to potentially qualifying for the American Opportunity Credit or the Lifetime Learning Credit.
And there's restrictions for the American Opportunity Credit as well.
Well, and one big difference is felonies. So if you're 17-year-old kids in high school and happens to be driving down the street, gets arrested with some drugs in the car, and actually has a felony charge because of it, you don't qualify for the American Opportunity Credit. You still can qualify for the Lifetime Learning Credit. And I mean, I think that's crazy. I think it's kind of sad. 17-year-old kids make a mistake. and now they're never going to qualify. So they get their life turned around. They want to go pursue education, and they cannot qualify for the AOC ever.
Right.
But understanding in the more typical in the American Opportunity Credit, it's only available for the first 4 years of college. So you cannot use this if you have a fifth year of college. Degree. You cannot use this for graduate degree. You cannot use this for, doctor school, anything like that.
So it's not just like for a bachelor degree. You have to use it in 4 years.
Yep, first 4 years of college. So that's important to understand. The way that the American Opportunity Credit works is if I pay $4,000 of college, I will max out that credit, and I will get a $2,500 credit on my when I file my taxes. The way that they arrive at that is the first $2,000 you spend on college, it's a dollar for dollar credit. The next $2,000 you spend on college is a 25% credit. So I max it again. If I spend $2,000 on college, I'm going to get a $2,000 credit. If I spend $4,000 on college, I'm getting a $2,500 credit. And if I spend $10,000 on college, I'm still only getting a $2,500 credit. Yep. For lifetime learning, the max credit is $2,000, and this is for any higher education. So you can use this all the way through grad school. There is a modified adjusted gross income phase out, meaning you can have too much income potentially to qualify for this. So you got to pay attention to that.
That includes the AOTC as well.
Yes, both of them do. Both of them have phase out. So you do have to make sure, double check your income on that when you're looking to apply for these things or using a tax professional to file.
And it's modified adjusted income as well.
Correct. So with that, one thing that's really important with the tax credits, using my Coverdell account to pay for my daughter's college, using a 529 to pay for my daughter's college, I cannot double dip.
Right.
Okay.
So if you use your 529 to pay tuition,
then I won't get the AOC or lifetime learning credit. Right. So let's if I have, let's say I have $10,000 in a 529 and I paid $10,000 for college, and I use all $10,000 to apply, and I apply that to my college expenses.
No tax credit.
I'm getting the tax-free growth. I'm realizing all the benefits of the 529 because I'm paying for qualified expenses for college. But since I personally didn't come out of pocket for money that year, I do not get the AOC or the lifetime learning, right? Let's say I had $10,000 in expenses. I have $10,000 in the 529, but I only use $6,000 of my 529 to pay for the tuition. And then I pay $4,000 with a personal check for my own out-of-pocket money. Then
you would qualify.
I can qualify for the AOC for the $4,000 I paid, and then $6,000 came from the 529. So you can say they just can't be used for the same expense, right? The same dollars can't go to two different things. In addition, just understand too that like with that double dipping rule, if like a grandparent is going to write a check to a school to cover some cost, again, that now I cannot pull that money. So if my college costs $10,000 and grandma and grandpa are going to write $2,000 check to the school, now my cost is $8,000. I cannot pull $10,000 out of my 529. Otherwise, I'm going to realize
the 10% penalty,
the potential penalty, the potential tax implications on the extra $2,000 that I pulled out. Okay, so you just got to understand that. Use only one. So now we paid for college, and or we've taken out loans, either plus loans for parents or the student has taken out student loans, right? So now we get into postgraduate year. Like I've graduated college, and now I'm kind of taking a divergent path here. I can either move into the working force and start to go live my life, or I can pursue graduate school, medical school, things like that. If I continue on in college, my options change a little bit. So this is for graduate years or similar. I can apply for Fulbright scholarships. I can apply for a Stafford loan. I can continue to use my 529, and I can continue to use my Coverdell
up until age 30. Yeah,
up until age 30. That's where I wanted to put that in, and that's important because most people realize like that's like they have a Coverdell account. I've seen this a couple times, and they're using it, you know, and then they get into like very late in school, or they go to work after graduates or after graduating with their bachelor's degree, and then they go back to college, and they're like, oh, I still had $20,000 in my Coverdell, and they apply at 29. Right. So first year graduate school, everything's gravy. Second year graduate school, all of a sudden they can't
tuition bill.
They can't qualify. It's not a qualified expense anymore. So they're paying taxes and penalties. They thought they had $10,000 to cover a $10,000 tuition, but after paying the taxes and penalties, they only have $6,000. Now we're $4,000 that we got to come up with. So just understanding like Coverdell, you lose the privileges, you lose the protection for qualified expenses at the age of 30. If you did not go back to graduate school or after graduate school or after medical school, now all of a sudden you're sitting there. Hopefully you've come to this point in your life and you have no college debt. Chances are that's not you though. Right. Chances are you do have some college debt. So now the question becomes, how do we maneuver this space? It's really like a whole separate conversation, debt management. We're not going to get into that. But really where this is important to understand is like, if I'm going to take on college debt, how can I take on healthy college debt? And that's going to lead us kind of into our tools. So one of the best websites that I think every single person should go to is FREOPP.org. And that is the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity. .org website. Again, Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity. They research everything. They're just looking to see, to put in perspective from an equality standpoint, the cost of things, both like hard fixed cost and also economic impact. They have some incredible data and research on the cost of college, the cost of education. They have part of the research, they actually compiled a list from 30,000 different bachelor's degrees that you could go to at all different schools in the United States, right? So we looked up yours, I looked up mine. The way that this data is aggregated is what they're essentially doing is they're saying, okay, here was the cost of college, right? And if the person would not have taken on, maybe the cost of college for me is $80,000 in total for 4 years. If I would not have taken on that investment in myself, that investment in education, to pay $80,000 into an education,
right?
What was the median like income over a lifetime for a person that did not have the college education? And then what was the graduates of this program in this school,
right?
What was their median income and what's the difference? So that is how they measure the return on investment here. So in this case, we were just talking with somebody else who graduated from the University of Minnesota. We looked up his college cost, and based on how much he could have been making at 25, the average person making at 25, the average that graduate was making at 45, what we look at is the amount of money he spent on college, he had a negative return on interest, return on investment of almost $100,000. So he would have, at this point, I assume like at 65, I think was the number they used, would have been $100,000 wealthier for not going to college. And that's one example. There's also at the same school, just so we're making sure we're not trashing University of Minnesota, because it's a great school. On the flip side, there is absolutely a major where the graduates would be realizing a return on investment of almost $472,000.
Right.
And there are schools with a return on investments of over $1 million. So this site, though, you can actually go in,
but as a
search
parent,
the city,
you should use this site.
You can
with
search
your
the
kids.
degree to say, hey, son, daughter, or even for my own, if I'm planning on going, like if I want to go back to Belmont for some degree.
What is the return on investment?
I can go back and say, okay, I know it's going to cost me this much money, but how is it going to change my life?
Right.
And if there is positive ROI, it becomes probably a smart thing to pursue that and if I got to take out some debt to accomplish it, it's an intelligent investment. So again, really incredible site. If you're planning on going to school for a degree, if you're planning on going to school, you don't know what degree you want, but you know what school you want to go to. If you're talking with kids, you know, hey, my kid really wants to go to University of Tennessee. Great, let's pull up University of Tennessee. Do you know what your kid wants to do? Let's look at the ROI. Let them understand, hey, by making the decision of pursuing this degree, you're actually losing money. Versus if you change it, if you pick this degree, statistically, you could potentially be making great money. Great return on investment. So such a powerful site, freopp.org. Another really important site that I use, I love it. It's John Hancock's 529 College Planning Center site. So you can Google John Hancock Education Planning Center. That's probably the easiest way to get there. It's jhinvestments.inviteeducation.com. The site's cool. So John Hancock is an investment company. They do offer 529s. However, you do not have to have their 529 in order to use this site, right? And just to make sure we have this conversation, we are not recommending John Hancock's 529. 529, the shopping experience is very unique to every single shopper because so many states offer so many different incentives. There's so many different plans. There's different kinds of setups and establishments for different creditor protection, for different kind of liabilities. There's a million things to consider. If you're shopping for a 529, talk to somebody that can help you with the research to choose the most appropriate 529 for you. We'll show you one more tool after this one that could help in that search. But back to the Education Planning Center. If you build it, you can put your family's information in there. So I have it for my daughter. My daughter's built in there. I put her age in there. There's a calendar that's developed. So if we end up picking a college, let's say I pick MTSU, and it will pull all the important dates from their sites, like parent walkthroughs, orientation, application deadlines, grant application deadlines, student orientation. Like, it'll pull all this and it'll put it on our family website. And especially important if I have like two kids that are like a year or two apart, because while the older kid's actually leaving to go to college this fall, my other kid is like starting to think about ACT tests and stuff like that. All of it can be managed on this site. It's really great. It pulls in a ton of data. But if I'm searching for colleges, this is really cool. I click on the college tab at the top. I'm going to select the state of Tennessee, just because that's where we're at. If my only search criteria is the state that I'm shopping, it pulls up. So I just did this search. It pulled up 217 colleges in the state of Tennessee. It shows so much information that's so important. So if my daughter is considering, let's look at University of Memphis. The University of Memphis has an in-state tuition cost of $8,200 a year. They have an 84.8, almost 85% acceptance rate. And what they're looking for is a minimum ACT score of 22 or an SAT reading of 563, math 543. If that becomes interesting, I can mark it. I can add it to an interested list, or I can go straight to their website. All right. This site is great for pulling that, but that's not my favorite part. We'll get to the last favorite part. Up at the top, there's a scholarship tab. So for this, they know that my daughter is in Tennessee, and I can continue to search down different things that maybe she's applying for a certain like STEM program or something like that. So we can do all these different searches, different type of keyword searches here. But this site actually just starts listing. Right now, I can see that she'll qualify for Tennessee Hope Scholarship. I can also see that the Tennessee Hope Scholarship has a 100% success rate. If you meet the criteria and if you apply, the approval rate is 100%. It shows the deadline of September 1, and then it gives me a link that I can click on to go and start the application process. Some unique ones. So, for example, the Gary Wagner K3OMI scholarship, not really sure what it is, but it does show the data that there's only one available, and it looks like as I'm reading through this, the criteria is pretty challenging. So this might not be one that I'd tell my daughter to apply for. However, there is, I'm just looking for one here. There's another one that has about 12. This is the Dora McClellan Brown Ministry Scholarship. Doesn't really matter what it is. I can see how she would apply. I can see the criteria. I can see that there's about 12 available, and about 75% of the time people that apply get accepted into that, right? So that might be worth writing a page paper, when my daughter's in her junior year.
Right.
So it's a great tool. Again, that's the John Hancock. The other thing is if you're starting the process, where do I put my money for, like what 529 do I choose if every state offers one? Morningstar is an independent research. They research all kinds of different investments and investment vehicles and mutual funds. They're great. They're very recognizable. It's also free research. So if you just Google Morningstar 529, it'll take you to their list that's updated every year.
It's a top list.
Yep. So the top 529s, and they basically just break it down into
gold, silver, and bronze.
Gold, silver, and bronze. So you can see what states offer the best. Again, I think it's really important. Don't only use this. You have to understand, like some states, more states are doing this now, but I know early on when 529s got started, I think the only state at the time that offered a 529 as a trust was, I believe, Alaska. And so this was very early on. This is all old data, but just to understand the differences. So if I'm a doctor and I have a high probability of opening myself up to lawsuits, malpractice suits, things like that, the 529, if I was not using that Alaska 529, my kids' college assets could be brought into consideration to pay out a lawsuit, right? Oh. So there's no creditor protection. Originally there weren't for all other 49 state options that you could have. That's why that's very different now. Almost every state has that creditor protection now. But it's important because if I've been saving my entire life for my daughter,
right.
She's 17, about to go to college next year. We've already applied. We got all these things set up, and I'm a doctor, and I, operate on someone, a less fortunate circumstance happens, right. And I have to pay all that college fund that was truthfully for my daughter might be brought back in and paid out to this person that's suing me. So again, that's an antiquated example, but what's important there is to know that every state has different incentives. You don't have to apply for the one in your state, but you can. It really boils down to your unique circumstance. So long podcast there because that's so much.
That was, yeah.
I mean, it's so much. I hope you guys enjoyed.
There's a lot to it, and we still left out a lot.
Yeah, we've skipped over quite details. A few notes.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts there?
I would just definitely, when you're talking about this with your kids, or you're about to have a kid, or you have a 1 or 2 year old, just talk to a financial planner because there's a lot to this, just so you can make an educated decision.
Yeah, I think just it's not even just a huge decision by way of cost. There's so many variables that come into play. It makes it really challenging. So whether you have if you have college debt, if you have kids and you're staring at it, you're never too late in the process to become educated. And I think that's important because I know there's probably a lot of people out there that might be listening that have a junior or senior in high school, and they're like, what's the point? What's the point of opening up a 529? Maybe a 529 is not, maybe we don't open up a 529. Right. But still having the conversation, say, during college I can make these decisions. During college, if I pay $4,000, I'll get $2,500
right. You have the
back.
AOTC, you have grants, you have things that you might not have known about.
So many things. So it's never too late to get educated. Because it's back to school season, we kind of wanted to capitalize on everybody's brain space there. We hope you're enjoying this. We definitely would love for you guys to just throw us ideas. You can reach out to us through our website, www.harpethwealthpartners.com, or just leave some comments and on the shows and stuff of future conversations you'd like to hear about. And if you have any specific questions, we'd love to be the ones to ask. But if you're not going to ask us, ask someone that you trust. And we hope that, again, that you've enjoyed it. You've learned something today. We'll talk to you guys in about a week. Bye. We hope you learned from our conversation today. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes and not intended to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions of how it might be applicable to your specific situation, please reach out to your financial professional. Of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you regarding specific questions or applications to your individual financial situation. With that, here are a few disclosures. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. With that, thank you, and we look forward to having you back. Take care.